two guys dressed in white. They were al-Hajis. They'd gone to the mosque, and they said, "We know you're a holy man and it's time to pray. Let's go to the mosque." And we sat in a circle. There were probably about 30 men, and the leader of the prayer, the imam, he looked at me and he said, what do you have to say to us today? I'm praying that the Lord will quicken my brain and my tongue so that I can communicate the gospel in Mori in a way that is clear and understandable, that it could be received and I wouldn't get killed.
Hello and welcome to Reaching the Rest podcast, episode number 1. This podcast was inspired by a desire to connect on a deeper level with global workers around the world to get to know those with boots on the ground, their stories that have dedicated their lives to fulfilling the Great Commission. My name is Amy Clausen, and I'm the missions director at Bethel's Rock Church. In today's episode, we have the honor of speaking with Doug Lowenberg, who lives and serves in Ethiopia. Thanks so much for joining us, Doug.
We're kind of a few thousand miles apart, but thank God for technology, and I'm honored to be able to talk to you about what God has been doing in our lives over the last couple of decades.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to start off, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your ministry?
Yeah. So my wife, Corrine, and I are married. We have 2 daughters, 2 grandkids. One of the things we give great praise to the Lord for is both of our daughters who grew up in Africa are now career missionaries in Africa with their husbands and with our grandkids. So we're just thankful that living and doing missions has given our kids a great heart to want to serve the Lord in cross-cultural ways also. Anyway, we have served in 4 different countries, primarily in Africa. 2 on the east side, where we are now, Ethiopia and Kenya. And then on the west side of Africa, Togo and Burkina Faso. So, it hasn't been one place, one city, one country for approximately 30 years of service. But we're now in Ethiopia. We've been connected with Ethiopia on the ground for about 12 years, in Kenya 14 years, a couple years in Burkina, a couple years in Togo. But we do missions that has originally started off pretty much with evangelism, trying to reach Muslims. And then it kind of morphed more into Bible school training and education, working in different schools at different levels. Now we're working both in the Bible school and then very directly with our national church here in Ethiopia to help them in development and trying to reach an entire nation with the gospel, working hand in hand with the church and then with the Bible school. So lots of kinds of things, lots of places, but the Lord has been so faithful through the years.
Absolutely. So you kind of talked a little bit about how long you've been on the field and the different places that you've been on. Can you describe your call to mission? So going back, rewinding, what did that look like?
Yeah. Well, I'm a preacher's kid, so I grew up in a pastor's home. And in those days, a lot of times we would have missionaries, again, I'm a little runt, but we would have them come to our home, have meals, sit there around the table. A lot of times the missionaries would even stay in our home. So I just grew up with that kind of communication and awareness about missions and people that I really respected. So throughout high school and college, I felt I wanted to be a missionary, but I loved science. And I actually thought about becoming a medical missionary, so going overseas, but using medicine as a way of communicating. Well, I eventually ended up more in a traditional ministerial training mode, a youth pastor, and then a senior pastor. But God really was giving us a tremendously successful youth ministry in the state of Louisiana. And out of the clear blue, I was invited to come and join the faculty at North Central Bible College in Minnesota. I really didn't want to do that. I really hadn't even thought of ever being in a Bible school. But through several invitations, I really felt the Lord telling me I needed to come and join North Central. Well, that's where Corrine and I met. She was already there serving as the registrar in the academic programs. So we married and served. And then I also, the very first day I walked on campus, I ran into an old missionary friend who also had just come to North Central for the first time to be the leader of their missions faculty.
Okay.
So I came to help develop youth ministries, and they asked me to be the men's basketball coach because of my
Wow.
sports background. Anyway, so it was Jerry Fowley, and I said, Jerry, I don't know if you're going to be leading teams overseas, but if you are, I'll be your first volunteer. Well, out of that, Karina and I married, and eventually Julia, our first daughter, was born. Led teams overseas, but on one of those trips to Ethiopia, and Ethiopia had just started a new Bible school. I was teaching during a fall break, and one evening in prayer, I really felt the Lord say to me, I want you to come back to this region full time.
Wow.
And every place we had gone, we had sensed that there were great needs, but it just, you just want that deep assurance. And that's one thing I would say to future missionaries. Somehow, I don't know that there's too many Damascus Road experiences where you fall off your horse and you're laying in the dirt and the Lord says, why are you doing this? But somehow there's got to be a deep, deep assurance that God is leading you and calling you into this place of ministry or kind of ministry, because there's going to be difficulties, and you got to kind of fall back on that. God, I didn't do this just because I was looking for an adventure. This is you.
Yeah.
So I think it was through that experience, and we came back from that trip. At that time, I was directing the missions program at North Central, and we had pioneered a church out in the Shoreview area.
Okay.
And I was also working on my doctorate at Bethel Theological Seminary. But through all of that, we felt this was the Lord. So we finished up that academic year, resigned from the church. I completed my doctoral studies. And then we applied to missions with AGWM and began that route of raising support, and ended up in Ethiopia. So, through ministry experience, short-term stuff, but growing up with a real heart and an openness to missions, but loving working with people both in the States and in academics. But the direction of the Lord saying, I want you, we were ready to go and excited to step into the mission venture. And that's what we've been doing now for about the last 30 years.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thanks for sharing. So, what advice would you give somebody who is interested in missions, but they're not sure if they're called?
Yeah, no, that's really an excellent question. Part of it is, I would say, like if they're at Bethel's Rock, get very involved in the church. Learn everything that you can. I've always felt God never wastes our experiences, our learning experiences. Learn how to do anything you can do, whether it's fix a car or do some electrical, because if you're, especially in the majority world, you're going to need every little skill you can muster.
Right.
But so I would say get involved in the church, because sometimes people have these lofty visions. I'm going to go reach, some country, Sudan for the Lord,
Sure.
but they're not even getting involved in Bible studies or different kinds of things. So get involved and develop your leadership skills, your servant skills. But also, is there some place where you are that you can begin to connect with people of other cultures and other languages, and just kind of sense, do I have a passion and the ability to step over those kind of cultures and engage with people and share my faith and possibly begin to disciple them? The other thing I would say is look for some overseas cross-cultural experiences where you can do a little bit of boots on the ground.
Right.
But make sure you come as a learner, to learn both from the missionary, learn from the culture, learn from the people. We are not in and of ourselves the ones that are going to make everything happen. It's got to be a God thing, and we become part of a team and part of a church. So I would say, just keep growing, and then keep open to how the Lord might give you that kind of clear call that you can lean back on and say, I know this is God.
Yeah.
And sometimes that'll be more to a ministry. Sometimes it'll be more geographical.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just don't try to put God in a box and say you got to do it this way,
Mm-hmm.
but just get involved, stay open, get
Mm-hmm.
the experiences that you
Mm-hmm.
can, and be ready to step out.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So, once you knew you were called, and you talked about this a little bit already, but can you describe more about that journey to get to the field? So once you made that decision, once you said you joined, AGWM and kind of started that itineration,
Yeah.
what did that piece of training look like for you guys?
Yeah. Yeah, and that I'd say for most missionaries that's one of the most challenging
Mm,
uh, feats or obstacles or hurdles we have to overcome.
hmm,
I like our AGWM system, but it puts a huge amount of pressure and responsibility on the missionary.
mm,
So when you approach AGWM and say, "I feel I'm called," you go through a battery of tests and
mm,
interviews. They want to know who you are and are you credible, because there's a whole lot of time and investment that's going to go into you, and a
sure.
lot of trust and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
responsibility. Anyway, once you get that approval, then our home state is Minnesota. And so then and that's one of the great things about our system. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, every church in Minnesota is potentially open to you to go meet the pastors, the
Mm-hmm.
congregations, share your calling, ask
Right.
for them to invest in you both in finance and in prayer. A budget is determined based on your kind of ministry and where you're going, and
Mm-hmm.
what your family looks like. You got 2 kids, 10 kids, and are they going to be in school? So
Mm-hmm.
all of that will determine a budget, and then it's you go to churches, you present
Mm-hmm.
who you are, what God's called you. You pray for God to move upon them,
Yeah.
so you'll have favor, and maybe they make a commitment, and so you work to get that level of commitments to what your matches your budget,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're given the green light, buy your ticket and go.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that process, but a lot of times that will take 6 months to a
Sure.
year to 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
So but you're the one who has to make those contacts with the pastors and, like,
Mm-hmm.
wonderful people like you and Pastor Biffert and others, but you have to begin to really launch out. So
Yeah.
it takes a lot of commitment and persistence
Yep.
to make those relationships, and
Mm-hmm.
then see how God moves the hearts of people
Mm-hmm.
to invest in you and in that ministry, and then you're launched.
Yeah, absolutely. So he had mentioned in kind of that itineration period and the budget, and then you had also just mentioned earlier when talking about your family having kids on the missions field. And I'm not sure, I was kind of trying to do the math in my head, but how old your kids were when you went to the mission field. But I know that's
Yeah.
something that a lot of times people kind of have questions about is what does it look like to have kids with you on the missions field? And I know from what you had said earlier that it has been a positive experience and they're actually in ministry and missions as well. But can you speak a little bit more about that, about what it looked like having kids and raising kids on the mission field?
Yeah. I'm trying to remember for sure. When we came to Ethiopia the first time, Julia, I believe, was going into 6th grade and Ruthie was in 3rd grade. It was back earlier, we had gone to Burkina
Mm.
Faso, and at that time, Julia turned 1 year old when we were
Wow.
in Canada learning French, and then
Okay.
took her as a little baby to Burkina. So there's kind of 2 phases in there. But the one that's been consistent was coming to Ethiopia,
Mm.
Julia in 6th, Ruthie in 3rd. There was a missionary kids school here in Addis called Bingham
Okay.
Academy, run by the Sudan Interior Mission, SIM. So they went there for our first term,
Mm.
went back to the States, they went to public schools. Then we came back and we were transferred to Togo.
Yeah.
Then they went to a British school, but they stayed at home in both cases. The school that was there that Julia was attending, as she was moving toward high school and graduation later, and then on to university, that situation wasn't great for her. So
Mm.
she ended up going across continent to a boarding school
Wow.
called Rift Valley Academy in Kenya. So that was pretty hard
Mm.
to send our At that time, she was a junior, so a junior in high school, flying by herself across the
Yeah.
continent from Togo to Kenya to go to boarding school. Ruthie stayed with us. Well, then we were transferred again to Kenya. And then, so Ruthie always was able to live at home and attend different kinds of schools, but live in our home.
Sure.
Julia did some of that in some of boarding school. I know the boarding school, and a lot of times, is not the best, the choice. But for us, for Julia, it was the best educationally,
Yeah.
socially, spiritually.
Good.
She ended up graduating from Rift Valley Academy as the number one student,
Wow.
and then went on. Both the kids went on to university and did well. And again, both of them have ended up back in missions.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the things I would say to all families. God calls you as a family.
Yeah.
Not just you as an individual or you and your spouse, but God calls the family. And then there's that deep confidence. God is going to make this a good experience for them as well.
Sure.
And so whether it's homeschool, boarding school, some other kind of curriculum, you love your kids, you support your kids, you want them to feel they are as called as you are. AGWM has a great missionary kids support program. So, you work with your kids and you want them to succeed, and the Lord helps in the midst of the missionary calling.
Yeah.
So we look at it now on this end and say, it's been a very good experience for all of us.
That's great. So do you have a favorite story? I mean, I know you've been to a lot of different places and have done a lot of different things through ministry, but when you kind of think back, like, is there one specific story that kind of always comes to mind as to just an incredible testimony or just being able to see God's favor through whatever the experience was?
Yeah. When I saw the questions, I saw that one, I thought, wow, this is going to be a challenge.
Yeah, I think
But
you can tell more than one if you
I
want.
think, well, no, I'll just tell one, but to me, this is just a real miracle of God's grace. So we were in Burkina Faso, and I had heard about a little village that had a huge, very historical, significant mosque. It was a little village called Ramatulai. It only had about 600 or 700 people in the population. And there was no ministry there, no church there. But God put it in my heart that after I had learned the language fairly well, I was supposed to go to that particular village and share the gospel.
Wow.
So we'd probably been in Burkina a year and a half, and I felt like I had learned Mori, the local language, pretty well, to the place that I felt I could really communicate. Well, I was able to catch a hitchhike over to a village about 20 kilometers from Ramatulai, stayed with a pastor that we had there. His name was Pastor Musa, and was there a couple of days. Then he found a guy with a motorcycle who took me the remaining 20 kilometers, so here's this missionary bouncing on the back of a motorcycle down these little ravines and roads, and it's all just dirt. And finally, we came out of this ravine, and here's this village with a big mud dirt wall and an open gate. And the guy pulled inside Ramatulai, and he said, "Thank you." I paid him, and then he took off. And I thought, wow, I know here I am in this place. The only person who knows exactly where I am is Pastor Musa, who's 20 kilometers away. Kareen is a couple of 100 kilometers away with Julia.
Yeah.
And I'm in this village. It's 100% Muslim. And I'm kind of looking around, and two guys dressed in white, they were al-Hajis. They'd gone to the mosque. They walked up to me, and they were incredibly friendly. And they just said, "Hi, who are you? What are you doing?" So they took me to their home. We sat there, we had lunch, and then it was about time for prayer. And we'd been talking about the things of God. And they said, "We know you're a holy man, and it's time to pray. Let's go to the mosque." So these two al-Hajis and I, we walked to this grand mosque in Ramatulai. And I'm praying in the spirit like mad. As, "Lord, please help me and lead me and protect me. Give me the words to say." Well, we went into the mosque and we sat in a circle. There were probably about 30 men, all men, in a circle, and the leader of the prayer, the imam, he looked at me, and I had been given a name by the Muslims called Abdullah, which means a servant of the Lord. And he said, Abdullah, what do you have to say to us today? So again, I'm praying that the Lord will quicken my brain and my tongue
Right.
so that I can communicate the gospel in Mori in a way that is clear and understandable, that it could be received and I wouldn't get killed.
Right.
So, so I shared, and the primary message I shared was the story of Abraham when God told him to offer his son. And the Muslims all know that because that story's in the Quran.
Yeah.
So I was telling that story and came to the point where the son, and there's a problem with that. Muslims say that that was Ishmael, where in the Bible it's Isaac. And I just said his son. It didn't get distracted with that small little detail. Anyway, I said, so they got ready to offer his son. And I said, in the Bible, it says that the son said, Dad, there's the fire and here's the knife and everything, but where is the sacrifice? And it's just so powerful that Abraham said, God himself will provide the lamb. So I'm telling them, and this is in Mori, and I'm communicating, and then went ahead to tell about how God provided the lamb, and then kind of fast forward to the story of Jesus coming down to the Jordan River where John the Baptist received him. And once again, Muslims view John the Baptist as a prophet, Jesus as a prophet, Abraham as a prophet. So I'm telling that story, but I said, when Jesus came, John the Baptist identified him as the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world, and talked about how Jesus came, and he was a prophet, but he was more than a prophet, and what he came to do. And I finished telling that story, and one of the guys sitting in the circle in that mosque, he said, this guy's not a Muslim. He's trying to convert us. And I thought, wow, my goose is cooked now. Again, I'm in this little village. I'm out in nowhere. And I was just really praying. And I kind of crawled on the ground up to this guy. And I said, brother, I'm not trying to convert you. I'm trying to help you come to know the God that you serve in a very personal way, and in a way that he will transform your life.
Wow.
Well, right around then, tensions were mounting, and those two al-Hajis that had taken me to the mosque came up beside me, put their hands on my shoulder, and they said, Abdullah, don't worry about him. He's crazy. Everything is okay. Whew. Well, things kind of calmed down. We continued, we talked, we prayed together. Well, then after that encounter, they led me back out of the mosque, back to their home. We ate some more, we talked some more. They were very curious. I wish I could say that everybody said, please pray, we want to receive Jesus as Lord. That didn't happen. But I felt like I had been obedient, and I had shared the gospel. And then I promised those guys that I would get them Bibles, because none of them had ever had a Bible.
Yeah.
Well, they found someone to take me back to Pastor Musa. Got there as the sun was going down. I told him what had happened. He said, Doug, we've had tourists go to that village, but you're the first person ever to proclaim the gospel
Wow.
to those people in that mosque. And it was very humbling and touching. And I wish I could tell you today I have had reports. I haven't. I did follow through. I was able to get Bibles that went. But to me, that's one of the most amazing stories of God's grace and protection and enabling to allow me in their mother tongue to share the gospel, to plant seeds. And then at that point, you just have to leave those things in the hands of the Lord.
Right.
But I just cherish that experience, that the Lord gave me that privilege to go to a place where the gospel had never been proclaimed, and to be able to do that.
Wow, that is amazing. So how would you say that, looking back at when you first, even before you were on the mission field, you were in ministry, it sounds like you have had a relationship with the Lord for quite a while, but thinking about kind of your journey to the field and on the field, all the places that you've been, things like this story that you just told, how has your time on the mission field changed you?
Yeah. Well, let's just say you're always learning.
Mm-hmm.
I think you realize. I remember, and I try to tell new missionaries this. So I was at North Central, and I had been a pastor,
Mm-hmm.
and I had degrees.
Mm-hmm.
But when you come to the field, you're nobody. I mean, it's true.
Mm-hmm.
People here, like even now in Ethiopia, they don't know you. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the people in the churches know me, and they hire and Korean, and they love and respect us. But just when you're out walking around, you're a nobody,
Mm-hmm.
and so you got to realize any of your badges of success in the States mean nothing.
Yeah.
And so, you have to come, you have to reprove who you are
Mm-hmm.
with loving the Lord, being
Mm-hmm.
credible, teaching, praying, serving. So I think I have learned that when you go into missions, it's like you're sort of being born all over again and you're starting from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
I think so that's important. I think every place you come, you've got to be a learner.
Mm-hmm.
Every culture is different, every language is different. So you come to serve, you come to love people, to come build
Mm-hmm.
relationships, and just pray that God gives you favor and anointing and
Mm-hmm.
wisdom, and then opens the right doors for you to be able to serve and help build that church. Do all that you can while you've got that opportunity.
Yeah.
I think with my athletic background, and one of the things I did, I ran track and ran relays. And you only have a certain segment of time on that track to run, and you got to run your best, and then
Mm-hmm.
you hand off the baton
Yep.
and you're done.
Yep.
And I look at ministry throughout the years, wherever we have been, that we got to run it's not only human effort. You have to
Mm-hmm.
run wisely,
Yep.
but give it your very best. But no, sometime that race is going to come to an end. The clock's going to tick down and you're done.
Mm-hmm.
And you just have to look back and say, I have no regrets. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
perfect. But while I was running and serving, I gave it my very best with my
Mm-hmm.
mind, my body, my spirit, my relationships, everything. And now I can hand the baton and say,
Mm-hmm.
Lord, I've run the race, I fought the fight, I finished the course. And so I guess the thing I learned is keep learning, keep
Yeah.
growing, keep serving, give it your best,
Mm-hmm.
but also hold life and ministry and positions loosely.
Mm-hmm.
And don't feel like you're the only one, I'm the only one, because you do your best and then you're going to hand that off and
Mm-hmm.
pray. God will bring other people who will be far better, more gifted, more
Mm-hmm.
talented, whether they are Americans or Africans,
Mm-hmm.
and you invest in them. And then you go to the sideline and you cheer, keep going, keep running, because we're wanting to see the Lord ultimately be the victor and Him to
Mm-hmm.
get all the glory.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so, with that idea of handing off the baton, I know that a lot of what you do in ministry is focusing on building up the national church and not only passing off that baton to the next missionary, but also to, the local church and people that are from Ethiopia or the different places that you've been. So can you tell us a little bit more about just that vision for missions of, it not just being somebody that's coming and telling somebody something and about the Lord and being the holder of that knowledge, but really being able to equip and train people from that place to be able to be the leaders in their own churches and in their own country.
Yeah, yeah. I would say that whole perspective of what you just described is probably one of the most meaningful
Mm-hmm.
um, types of commitments and experiences we have had.
Yeah.
I think about in Kenya, people that we invested in the Bible schools and in graduate programs, who are now key leaders in churches or in denominations or in their missions programs or back in the Bible schools. Here in Ethiopia, one of the things Karina and I have been working on over the last year is transitioning leadership at the Bible school
Mm-hmm.
to other people so that they can step in and be the leaders, and then we're there to coach and
Mm-hmm.
mentor So it's not hand that baton and say we're done,
Right.
but to give that responsibility and then be there to help them problem solve and work through kinds of issues so that ministries become more indigenous and that local leadership are there with the responsibility, but with our support to make the decisions. And sometimes we may say privately, I wouldn't have done it that way, or I wouldn't have made that decision. But you have to trust them and their spiritual discernment and instincts to be able to take what you've invested and then just let them move things forward. So I think that every place we have served, we look back and we see people who now have emerged into key leadership. I'm talking about Africans, and that brings us huge joy
Yeah.
to see that that investment is bearing fruit in their lives. They're able to go so much deeper into the culture and language and translation, discerning issues that are going on in the lives of people. So, that's where we ultimately want to go.
Yeah.
I feel like there's always going to be a place for a missionary to partner,
Yeah.
to advise. Sometimes there'll be no missionary, and we'll talk about this in just a few minutes about some of the real new great things that we're seeing happen. So there's going to be a place where the missionary may have to be the point person to launch new ministry, but our goal is raise up that national church,
Yeah.
invest in leaders, and see them take the lead, and then don't compete, but support and see them go, and maybe it'll go new and different directions, but you rejoice in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was reading in one of your recent newsletters, you were talking about how, you guys have been able to have such a great impact at the college level and at training new pastors, but that one of your prayers was for the next generation. And that kind of got me thinking. I hadn't really thought about that before, that a lot of missionaries, they are able to partner really well with, adults or people who are ready right now to go and, pick up that baton. But what does that look like when you're then trying to create that culture that continues, and they're not just waiting until they can be at an age where they can go to the Bible college?
Yeah. Well, I can think we come at it in two different ways. Even this past Sunday, we were in a church that was celebrating children and teens, and they had them share testimonies because they're just coming into the start of their new academic year. They're a little bit behind where, in fact, this is interesting. Yesterday was the New Year's here in Ethiopia. We're on a totally different calendar. So yesterday we celebrated New Year's. So leading into the New Year's and the start of their academic year, they were celebrating youth. So anyway, so I was looking at these kids up on the stage as they're singing and sharing testimonies. I mean,
Wow.
some of them are elementary age, junior high, middle school. But one of the things we're trying to do is bring in people that can strengthen teen and youth and children's ministries at the national church level for the Ethiopia Assemblies of God.
Yeah.
So even though Karina and I are not real gifted and don't have a lot of experience, who are resources that we can bring to work with youth leaders, children's leaders, and build strong children's, youth, teen ministries at the national church level? So, that's one thing that we would do. In the Bible school, we will talk to our students about them not dominating or monopolizing the ministry, but who are they raising up in their local churches? So I think we kind of come at it in several different prongs to say we've got to address the children. And unlike in the United States, a lot of times children here in the majority world, I mean, they're valued as incredibly important in the family, but when it comes to ministry and opportunity, they're kind of overlooked completely. It's just like adults. So we're trying to raise awareness and recognize the importance of next generation is now.
Right.
And so we've got to say, what are we doing? We just can't entertain kids in Sunday schools and in ministries, but what are we doing to really begin to make disciples out of 5-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 15-year-olds, and do that through the national church as well as through our students who are pastoring and leading in local churches.
Yeah, that's Good. And that's something, that we are constantly needing to work on doing back here as well. So that's good.
Yeah.
Happy New Year to you. And that kind of leads into,
By the way, it's 2000. It's 2017. So living here in
interesting.
Ethiopia, I'm 7 years younger than I would be if I was in the United States.
Yeah, okay. Well, so kind of getting into, some of those like practical things. What does a typical day or week look like for you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of it depends on what the ministry issue is at that particular
Mm-hmm.
time. If we're kind of in the Bible school mode, it would mean getting, I get up early anyway and do devotions, and Karina and I try to do daily exercises and then get ready, head into the Bible school.
Mm-hmm.
So then I may be teaching, administrating, working with other faculty and students, and then just doing the typical educational thing where there's
Mm-hmm.
prep and there's teaching and grading and counseling and advising.
Mm-hmm.
Other times my focus is on the church.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll go over to the church early, have meetings with the general superintendent,
Mm-hmm.
departmental leaders, finance people, and try to keep things moving when it comes to activities and engagements that I can help with moving the church forward and getting the
Mm-hmm.
right people here or guiding and direction. Like one of the things we're doing now is we're trying to begin to develop what we call Africa Tabernacle
Mm-hmm.
Evangelism, where we have a little factory. We'll go buy raw steel. We'll fabricate the walls and the roofs and the foundations, and
Wow.
then select places and help get that tabernacle there and constructed. We got a medical team that's going to be coming. So I'm doing the prep work to make sure we're set. They'll come in and we'll open up our church and have hundreds and hundreds of unbelievers out of non-Christian backgrounds come to the church and have their eyes checked or their
Hmm.
teeth. So
Wow.
facilitating those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Finding a hotel and getting the church people ready. And so
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow I'm going to be flying to a city with an Ethiopian, and we'll meet with the congregation and train them in personal evangelism
Wow.
so that when people come to their church and they're sitting around waiting to have their eyes checked,
Yeah.
we'll have friends sitting beside them just beginning to share their faith and their experience.
Mm-hmm.
So again, there's really no one day that looks exactly like the other.
Yep.
But it's just what is the need and how do we need to engage and what's going to move this thing forward.
Mm-hmm.
So life is always full of activity and
Mm-hmm.
surprise and joy and encounter. And we just love all the many open doors that are there for us.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit more about the place that you live? So your city, your church, your home.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we love Ethiopia. We've loved this place God's given us a real heart for the people. Ethiopia is what we called the Horn of Africa,
Mm-hmm.
kind of the northeast corner. Some people don't realize that part of Ethiopia, and where we live in Addis, it's 7,500 feet above sea level.
Hmm.
So, I mean, we live at a higher elevation than Denver, Colorado,
Wow.
the mile high city. We're
Mm-hmm.
beyond that. But Ethiopia is also the second largest populated country in all of Africa.
Wow.
I heard a statistic just last week that now they're saying there's 130 million people. The only country larger in population than Ethiopia is Nigeria.
Hmm.
And we have 86 different people groups and language groups. So then you've got these high elevations, 15,000 feet above sea level.
Mm-hmm.
Parts of Ethiopia are 300 feet below sea level. You got mountains, you got deserts, you got cold rain weather, and then you got dry areas where there hasn't been a drop of rain for several years.
Mm-hmm.
All the languages, all the people. The Assemblies of God is a younger church. We just celebrated our 25th anniversary. And we have about 1,000 churches. So, I mean, when I look at Ethiopia, I just see need everywhere, both economically, spiritually.
Mm-hmm.
About half of Ethiopia's population are part of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. So, I mean, they would have ancient roots going all the way back to the beginning of the church that
Yeah.
came then into North Africa and Syria down to our area. So they're 50% are very religious, but very few of them even know what it means to have a personal encounter and a relationship with Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So their confidence is in fasting, pilgrimages, going through the saints. I mean, there's a real spiritual darkness and blindness. So how do we get the gospel to them?
Yeah.
About 30 to 35% of Ethiopia are Muslims, and Islam is very intentionally trying to grow and influence the country in every way. So I look at this country and its uniqueness and its people, the home of coffee, hallelujah. You know, they say coffee was discovered and first roasted accidentally here.
Okay.
So it's very much a coffee culture. People love to sit and drink coffee. But you look at the spiritual need and the economic need and so many things. And the diversity. So that even affects then how the church works
Yeah.
and how we train. So we're trying to get materials into our Bible schools right now in 5 different languages. So we have English and then the main language of Amharic and then Afan Oromo and others. So how do we get those materials and get them into the hands of people so that then they can move out into the regions and contextually present the gospel
Yeah.
to try to reach a nation for Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so it's very, very diverse, but very unique, very special, and a place and people that we love.
Yeah. So, what are some of the different traditions, cultural norms of the people that you work with, the people that you're serving, that you're trying to reach? What does that look like? So, obviously, we learned a little bit about it's 2017 and it was just New Year's. But what are some of those
Yeah.
other things?
Well, I mean, one of the really famous places, although Ethiopia hasn't developed tourism much, but up in the north, it's about an hour flight from Addis, is a city called Lalibela that has very famous wonders of the world, hand hewn churches out of rock. There are 11 churches that were built in the 12th and the 13th century, and it goes back to the time of the Crusades and the domination of Islam, when people were not able to go from Ethiopia up to the Holy Land. So this guy, Lalibela, who was a king, had a vision that he was supposed to build a new Jerusalem in his little city, and they supposedly built these churches by hand.
Wow.
So what they claim through the Ethiopian tradition of the church, the people worked by day and the angels worked by night. And so, I mean, a person can Google Lalibela and these amazing churches. Karina and I have been there many, many times. It's amazing because they're fully operational.
Wow.
They have priests. People are coming on pilgrimages. So the religious heritage is very important. And another part of the culture is Ethiopia is the only country in Africa that was not colonized by European powers. So again, that creates a real pride and a distinctive that we have never been overrun by these European types. So you know that creates a uniqueness here. But greeting people, you always shake hands or you bump shoulders. You never just kind of give a hi, but there's always a physical contact and an appreciation. You highly respect older people. If they take you to their home, they may go through the coffee ceremony, which means they're going to roast the beans right in front of you,
Wow.
which smells so fabulous. Pound the beans, boil them in water, make popcorn, so they have coffee with popcorn. And so they'll do the coffee ceremony to honor you in their home, which may take an hour and a half just to have
Wow.
a couple of cups of coffee. But again, time is no issue. So just slowing down, making the most of the moment,
Yep.
being with people, building relationships, all of that is part of the culture, trying to learn language and identify with them and show appreciation. So those are the kind of things that you just learn, your schedule has to be set aside, and things aren't
Mm-hmm.
going to happen the way you want. We
Yep.
may have power outages. The internet may not work. I mean, so just you got to love people and be flexible and
Mm-hmm.
prioritize relationships.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's good. So you've talked a little bit about this, but how has culture or even just major kind of current events, how have that has that impacted just the people where you live, your ministry? So whether that be political tension or whether that be natural disasters, how have things like that kind of impacted and had an effect on your ministry and your ability to be able to share the gospel?
Yeah. I mean, that's really kind of ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
Over the last 3 years, 4 years here in Ethiopia, we've had, they would prefer not to call it a civil war, but we've been involved in a civil war. One of the northern provinces wanted to expand and not secede, but take over the entire country and rule the country politically, economically, militarily. So that has made travel difficult, and there's
Mm-hmm.
places even now that are still insecure and you can't go. Well, that affects your ministry, and
Yeah.
that affects the local pastors.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Also, one of the interesting things that we didn't realize, the people that have, the Christians who have been part of that province, that maverick province, they feel like the rest of the country, even the rest of the Christians, turned against them.
Mm-hmm.
So now that the conflict has been resolved, there's peace, we're moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's tension between the
Mm-hmm.
Christians in that province and in other places. So
Yep.
how do you navigate and show them you love them?
Mm-hmm.
You weren't in favor of them and their own tribe conquering the country,
Mm-hmm.
but you still love and respect them.
Yeah.
So I think that you just always have to be aware. You're not involved in politics, but politics
Mm-hmm.
affect everything,
Mm-hmm.
especially in countries like this.
Yeah.
And there is no separation of church and state.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to be careful, love and respect, not don't
Mm-hmm.
take sides
Yeah.
tribally or politically,
Mm-hmm.
ethnically. And that's one of the things I constantly speak to our leadership in the
Mm-hmm.
church. Our church cannot be viewed as belonging to a particular tribe, or a
Mm-hmm.
particular tribe has dominance in the church.
Right.
So I think it's how do we uh, be aware of these kinds of things related to
Mm-hmm.
travel, how people view you, how they view themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody recognizes, I mean, every place we have been, people will identify themselves by their tribe before they will by their country.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm Amharic before I am Ethiopian, or
Okay.
I'm Kikuyu before I am Kenyan.
Mm-hmm.
And you just have to realize those values and traits they grow up with. So
Mm-hmm.
how do you mitigate those differences and the tensions that are there politically, ethnically, geographically,
Yeah.
economically, to try to present a gospel
Mm-hmm.
that accepts everyone
Yeah.
and then can bring a merger and an
Mm-hmm.
integration, and not destroying the distinctive, but to
Right.
say we as the body of Christ have
Yep.
to be an example to a country that shows unity and love and
Mm-hmm.
inclusiveness.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those kind of things affect who you are and how you serve in these countries in the majority world.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good. So kind of thinking about this current year, and I know that again in your newsletter you had talked about how there was a goal of planting 1,000 churches with the AG in
Yeah.
Ethiopia. So what has been, whether it has been with the AG Church or you personally, what has been one of your biggest wins in this year, our
Yeah.
2024, year 2017?
Yeah, well, back on the 2024, our national church, I mean, we try to move between the global calendar and our local calendar, but the Ethiopia Assemblies of God did set a goal to try to plant 1,000 churches
Mm-hmm.
this year, 2024. And as at the halfway point on the calendar, the EAG had already planted approximately 340 new churches. So, I mean, it's not exactly at the halfway point, but hopefully it'll be exponential.
Yeah.
But to me, that's fantastic.
Yes.
And even if we don't reach the goal, to think that more than 300 new bodies of Christ have been planted across the country is phenomenal. And we just give the glory to God and thank the Lord for the vision of our leaders and many young men and women willing to go and start under a tree, in a school, in a house, to begin to gather people together. But I would say probably what I would feel like is our greatest victory so far is that the Ethiopia Assemblies of God, along with the encouragement of us, the mission, sent their first cross-cultural foreign full-time missionary to Juba, South Sudan. And this guy, he's a friend, he's in our Bible school. He serves as a district superintendent on the western border and had already planted 15 or so churches in his own state and then 8 or 10 over in South Sudan. So one time he was here at the Bible school in Addis, and I was saying, his name is Peter. Peter, we need to plant the church in South Sudan. It's the newest country on the continent. There is no Assemblies of God. What can you do? What can we do to help you? And he said, I'm going to resign my district superintendent position and my local church. I will go as a missionary. I know the language. I know the people. I'll go to the capital of Juba. So we were able to raise some funds and work with the national church leadership and send him. So he's been in Juba, South Sudan since around the latter part of April, the 1st of May. He's already planted 6 churches. He's able to go to the government and get the South Sudan Assemblies of God registered as an official church body. The first time we've ever had an AG church officially in South Sudan in human history. So we're now working with him to try to shore up his support, encourage him to plant more churches, trying to figure out how we can come alongside and begin to do some kind of Bible school training, raise up that next generation in South Sudan. So I would say at this point that is a great hallelujah to God using an Ethiopian and a national church. We're only kind of there on the sideline encouraging. One of the things we're doing now is trying to blend help from the Kenya Assemblies of God to come into Juba and maybe the Tanzania and the Uganda assemblies. So to get national churches in Africa working together to reach a country, and I mean, we need to jump in there ourselves, but it's just very exciting to see what the Lord is doing through our partners here on this continent.
Absolutely. That's amazing. So what would you say the future then looks like? I mean, I know what you just shared leads into that, but bigger picture, what are you looking forward to?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I continue to look at working with our national church. You know, you have different levels of education. I mean, all the way from a doctorate, master's, bachelor's, below that's a diploma. One of the things I want to see here in Ethiopia is us continue to establish more diploma training centers out in the regions in local languages. That makes Bible school training, ministerial training more accessible. Coming to the capital can be a big problem because then they come and they like the better life and they don't go back. So getting the training out there, it's more contextual. It's more affordable. It's more accessible. I would really like to see us continue to work to see diploma programs planted strategically in key areas, maybe near some of the borders, like up near Sudan, so that we could have a Bible school that's training people who can easily move through those porous borders into Sudan that's closed, or into Eritrea in the north that's closed, or Djibouti and Somalia that are closed. You know, so just being strategic in training that not only is preparing pastors, but missionaries that can expand the kingdom, that we can move toward that 1,000 churches planted, but not only the numbers, but then to grow in depth as well as in the numbers. And so how God can use us I love teaching. I'm involved in our doctoral program
Mm-hmm.
and continuing to develop training on that level, writing articles,
Mm-hmm.
putting things down in paper that can be used in generations to come and in the
Mm-hmm.
hands of our people. We love our kids and our grandkids. We got two little grandkids growing up as missionary kids out in the middle of the Indian Ocean.
Wow.
And one of my goals is to invest in their little lives and help
Mm-hmm.
them grow up and love Jesus and
Mm-hmm.
become all that they can be,
Yeah.
however God will lead them vocationally in the years to come. So I think we just look in all kinds of directions in our family, in the
Mm-hmm.
local church across the continent, and say, let's keep running the race and
Yeah.
be productive and serve the Lord, build up other people,
Mm-hmm.
hold life loosely, and just give the glory to Jesus. So that's kind of how we're looking in the next number of years and whatever the Lord opens up for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, sometimes we hear stories like the ones you've shared, and it just seems so far removed from, us back in the United States, and what can we do? So what are some ways that we can be supporting you? What are maybe some specific things that we can be praying for, or what does it look like for, us back in the States to support you on the field?
Yeah. Oh, thank you. One of the great needs that we have across Africa in our mission today, we need more personnel. We
Mm.
need more boots on the
Yep.
ground, whether they're coming and working in unreached areas. But one of the real needs, we have a whole generation like Kareen and me that are moving off the scene
Mm.
that are committed to Bible school training.
Mm-hmm.
We need, and not again, not that we're the only ones who can do it, but there's something really qualitatively exponentially helpful when you've got national Bible school trainers and missionaries coming together, different worldviews,
Mm-hmm.
but committed to excellence. So one of the things is I pray that there would be people at Bethel's Rock and others
Yeah.
who listen to this podcast who say, I love training and I'm
Mm-hmm.
willing to leave my church or
Mm-hmm.
a Bible school, a Christian university, employment, and come and take those skills and love for training and mix it cross culturally
Yep.
to raise up that next generation
Mm-hmm.
of Bible school teachers,
Mm-hmm.
pastors, missionaries, evangelists.
Mm-hmm.
So, we send people. We need your prayers.
Mm-hmm.
The protection only eternity is going to show how
Mm-hmm.
somebody who maybe was stirred in the middle of a night that prayed for Doug and Kareen,
Yeah.
where God protected us. I don't know how that all works,
Mm-hmm.
but praying just for wisdom that we will make the right decisions, that we'll use our time and energy and resources wisely,
Yeah.
to give God given wisdom as we work with national leaders and then with people who are outside the church.
Mm-hmm.
So, prayer, sending people, your finances, sending your pastor to come and help us in a month or so to do pastoral training.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sending people to help us develop youth
Mm.
ministries, children's ministries. I mean, women's ministries, the list
Yeah.
goes on and on.
Yeah.
So it's a whole lot of ways that partnering with you is a great blessing.
Mm.
And we're just so thrilled how God is using you, Amy, and the church to impact the Twin Cities and beyond. So partnership led by the Lord
Mm-hmm.
is really the way that we're going to further his kingdom.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today and share about your ministry and stories. And we're so honored to be able to partner with you and to be able to support the work that God is doing through you and through your ministry. And we look forward to reading your updates and continuing to just stay in touch and see what's yet to come. So thanks so much, Doug, for joining us.
Well, God bless, Amy. Thank you.
You too.
God bless you. It's a privilege. Thank you.